I wanted to give you a little bit of an update. Now, tomorrow, obviously, I am going to, now, not obviously because I haven't been streaming very often, but I will be giving my synopsis of the big court decisions from this week. Simply, it's been very difficult with my work schedule to get to a lot of these activities I want to obviously comment on, even write about. So if I'm not writing about them, I'm I'm also probably not going to be streaming about them. So I hope that you guys can watch me right now. Um, and if you are in the chat, please give a shout out and check out the link tree. So all like I said, all of those big court decisions I want to talk about tomorrow. I will have more time today with my work schedule. I didn't have almost any time. There was an article that I've worked on for the past week, put in a lot of work for it, and it goes into this issue of a super PAC here in the United States called the um, the Democratic Majority for Israel, and I just put a link in the chat. So I'm not using OBS; it just isn't worth the time today to um, put it together because I don't have enough time. I only have about 20 minutes because I keep the Jewish Sabbath. So instantly there's going to be 50 more comments from certain people. But, all kidding aside, I won't be able to show this on the screen. So you can look in the chat and click on the link for the article. It says, "Ignore the suffering and open hostility. It's clear skies for 2024. A comprehensive guide on how the Democratic majority for Israel is telling voters to mortgage their economic future for the losing cause of saving the pro-Israel wing of the Democratic Party." So, right off the bat, I want to say that when I publish articles that have some sort of connection to the Middle East, to Israel or the Palestinians or anyone that's in that region, I do get accusations on the one hand that I'm some shill for APAC or I'm a dime store Ben Shapiro, or on the other hand, there's people who say that I'm disloyal and I need to shut up and just be on the right team and just stop pretending that my opinion is better than any of the experts that are actually in charge of things. And I'm not going to buckle to either side. I think both of them are full of crap. I think people are way too doctrinaire about how they approach these topics. So this article is about this super PAC led by Mark Mellman, who is a longtime Washington insider. Um, Let me look at his biography real quick. So Mark Mellman is the founder of the Mellman Group, and he has been a campaign worker for many, many, many years. He's been working for people like John Kerry back in 2004. He's also had clients that are at the senatorial or congressional level. Um, he's also, in many cases, butted heads with the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. He's a modern Orthodox Jew, meaning that, modern Orthodoxy, for those of you that are either not Jewish or you're unfamiliar with it, it is a stream of Judaism that often has a lot of emphasis on Zionism and also Zionist philosophy. So not just casual Zionism, but real hardcore Zionism. But the reality is, I think that a lot of them have gone soft on that. Not that I'm some sort of big booster for um, you know, ideological zeal, right? But you have many of them. For example, Peter Beinart, who's a modern Orthodox Jew who many years ago started to hint that he believes that Israel is an apartheid state. So I'm not comparing Mark Mellman to him, but I am saying that Mark Mellman comes from a stream of the Jewish American community and of the Democratic Party, that their values they may be avowedly pro-Israel. That might be a value that they subscribe to, and that they preach to their family and all of that. But in their everyday life, they are liberals. And there's, being a liberal, there's no objection on my part. You can have any opinion you want. I am a libertarian, a civil libertarian, and an economic libertarian, and in almost every case, a foreign policy libertarian. So I have no objection to people having other opinions than mine. But Mark Mellman and his colleagues at the DMFI, they sell the Jewish community on this misbegotten notion that by remaining within the Democratic Party, and I'm not telling you to go vote Republican, but I'm telling you that your commitment to the Democratic Party as an institution, going out and voting in their primaries, donating to their campaigns, signing up people to collect ballots and things like that, that is, in point of fact, deceiving Jewish voters. It's also, I mean, it's the same type of deception that they pull on Latino voters, which I think Latinos are, in many ways, they're waking up again to all this deception that they've been going through all these years. That you have issues that the Democratic Party has pitched for decades. And today was Roe v. Wade. And I'll mention it in this context. Just like with Roe v. Wade, that the Democratic Party has promised to feminists for all these years that it's only them having a majority in Congress that protects their right to choose. That's turned out to be a lie. Why? Because they didn't enshrine it into law. Why? Because if they did, they would lose the bait that gets them to vote for them and give them the power. Okay. Also, partly because that law could be struck down by the Supreme Court. And now we've seen the result of that approach, which is that the Supreme Court has struck down Roe v. Wade. Similarly, the pro-Israel Democrats, they bait their friends, other Jewish people and pro-Israel people, into voting for the Democratic Party, because they say that you need a strong bipartisan consensus in Congress that supports Israel. So Larry, I see you're in the chat. Just click on the article, because I'm sorry, I don't have a share screen today. I just don't have the time to set up an OBS. Um, so in other words, it's pandering. It's the same type of pandering they've said to um, black people about reparations. It's the same type of pandering that they've said to Latinos about a pathway to citizenship, which, by the way, I think many of them don't care about. Latinos who have been born in the United States, why do they need a pathway to citizenship? They have it. They have it. It's basically it's a bait and switch, and it's the same thing that Democrats are saying to the American Jewish community. They say that, well, on the one hand, you need a bipartisan consensus on Israel in order for Israel to have a secure foreign policy relationship with the United States. Now, I will say that for many years, that was the situation, that a bipartisan majority during the Cold War, especially, kept the United States and Israel on the same path in terms of a military alliance. And then since the end of the Cold War, with the U.S. Forcing Israel, and not exactly forcing, but kind of nudging them along into the Oslo Accords, with the U.S. nudging them along with things like the Wye River Agreement, with the U.S. going and selling them weapons that are way advanced of anything that they have, but in exchange for concessions in terms of territory, Israel has bargained away a lot of its independence. Now, that's a policy opinion. On the other hand, the Democratic majority for Israel, they want to wed the topic of Israeli American relations to their progressive policies. So today, I can tell you, okay, this actually would work better if I did have a share screen, but let me see where the I do have. Hold on. Bear with me for a moment. So so while one second, it's going. I've never used Restream.io for this, so let's see here. Oh, it's for guests. Eh. So anyway, I'll just share the link in the chat. Sorry, but it's not really the best day for me to be doing this. But Mark Mellman, he's the founder of this group, and he keeps telling Jewish Americans that they should be voting in Democratic primaries in order to prevent an anti-Israel takeover of the Democratic Party. So if you read my piece, which some people can't be bothered to do, including a good friend of mine who I've known for many years, they would understand that the point that I've been trying to make is that the mission has already been failed. The Democratic Party has been lost to many radical ideologies, and among those ideologies is hostility to Israel, anti-Zionism, and in some cases more traditional types of anti-Semitism. There are a number of Democratic politicians that, for example, openly court the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan. But the fact is that the Democratic majority for Israel can't even keep its um, stuff straight about what its priorities are. Mark Mellman today, while there was a letter from the entire, well, not the entire Democratic caucus in the Senate, there were 24 Democrats in the Senate who signed a letter to President Biden calling on him to tell the Israeli government when he visits next month to Israel that it wants to be involved in an investigation into the death of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. And among the people who signed the letter was not just Raphael Warnock, a member of the Senate who was endorsed by Democratic Majority for Israel, even though he had said in the past that Israel's military was akin to the apartheid militaries of Namibia and South Africa, but also Chris Van Hollen, who was the leader of the whole group. Chris Van Hollen has always been considered a so-called pro-Israel Democrat. And look, I want to just have you wrestle with these concepts. The idea that these people are actually dependable on any issue is ridiculous. You see the same thing happening with Republicans on the Second Amendment. Many of them, 14 of them, went and they voted for absurd restrictions on the right of Americans to keep and bear arms simply because it was politically expedient. Republicans, and then you have Democrats, 24 Democrats. So I'm willing to criticize anyone who's elected to office. Don't hold me as some sort of partisan shill. All I'm saying is that the Democratic majority for Israel has supported people who went and stabbed them in the back. And what does the Democratic majority for Israel do? This group that spends tons of money on ads against radical left part primary candidates. They don't do anything to criticize the people that actually get elected. They'll yell bloody murder as long as you're just a candidate. But once you're already in office, they basically are like a pussycat. And that's really the criticism that I have. The person that I'm asking an apology from, and I know that he, normally he's very eager to offer criticism of the slightest comment that you have that is out of step with his viewpoint. Okay, this is a person he's on. I'm not going to say who it is, but if you know who it is, it's pretty obvious. He's on a channel. He's one of the people on the channel called the Juminati, and he said to me when I posted it on their forum, he said, "Hey, you're basically carrying water for the enemy. They're looking for who to send the check to." Because he was trying to make it seem as if my entire premise was to support the, to really to oppose the U.S. relationship with Israel. That's what he was trying to say. Because he didn't read the article. And I actually asked him several times if he read the article. My article says that they have already lost the battle of preserving the pro-Israel polity within the Democratic Party. You see that, yes, they are able to defend certain seats. In fact, they defended seats in Ohio and in North Carolina that are held by so-called pro-Israel Democrats. But in other cases, they haven't. Why? Because they're full of shit. They don't have an actual position. They don't actually have a real agenda that they put forward. What they usually will do is they'll put forward an ad that's nothing to do with the Middle East, and they'll accuse a candidate of being a disloyal Democrat, of not voting enough with the Biden agenda, or not voting enough, or not advocating, I should say, for the Biden agenda, or supporting Pelosi, or supporting Hillary Clinton back in the day. That's their tactic. All they want you to do um, is to believe that this person is unqualified because they're not a loyal Democrat. They're not on the same page with House Speaker Pelosi. And if you guys want like a deeper dive into this later, I will um, do it at your request. I don't really need to, but because I posted this in the chat, and I'll also add it to the. Let me see. I will add it to the description. So if you are going to here, you want to read it and you're watching this on replay, I have saved it. So just and refresh the screen if you don't see it yet. So basically, I go through all of the real issues that this pack has been trying to say that they're dealing with, that they don't really deal with. Okay. They say that they're against anti-Israel candidates within the Democratic Party. Fine, that's their position. I personally don't care. I'm not a Democrat, and that position isn't the primary one I vote for. But they ended up endorsing Raphael Warnock in 2020 during the Senate runoff, when in fact it was known at the time that he had called Israel an apartheid state, but he was in the runoff. They had to support him because he's running against a Republican. Who are they loyal to in the end? Are they loyal to the Israelis, or are they loyal to? And by the way, that's really a charged topic. But are they really committed to the side of advocating for Israel? So that's the way that they would want me to say it. Are they really committed to that? No, they're committed to getting Democrats elected. So they basically, the Democratic majority for Israel, sold their soul by saying that Mark Mellman, this con man who runs DMFI, had a Zoom call with Raphael Warnock where he basically said that I don't really think what I said back in 2018, only 2 years ago, about Israel, when I said that they were an apartheid state, when I said that they were the same, that's basically what he said. He said that they were like South Africa, and when they were under apartheid and they were occupying Namibia. It was exactly the analogy that he said. And then he started to dance around. Hi, Chris. Interesting to see you on a Friday. So I only have about 10 minutes left. I will, by the way, so those of you that have missed the beginning, I will be doing a stream tomorrow on longer topics that are more, obviously more in the news, Roe v. Wade, and also the overturning of it, and the new gun laws that are, or I should say the gun laws that have been undone by the Brule decision, I think it's called. So another thing that they've done is they've endorsed people who are absolutely loathsome, people like Bob Menendez Jr. Look, I should say that Bob Menendez Jr., who's running for Congress in New Jersey, it's not really him who's the issue. The only issue is that he wouldn't be a candidate were it not for his dad, Senator Bob Menendez Sr. Why do you have a problem with Bob Menendez Sr.? Because there was a federal case where he was accused of having sexual relations with underage Dominican prostitutes in the Dominican Republic, where there was ample evidence that he had done it, and he got off on a technicality. It was some sort of bizarre, some of the evidence was determined to be inadmissible, and therefore there was a mistrial declared, and or I don't know, maybe it was acquitted. I'd have to go back and look. And I believe in guilty until proven innocent. And at the same time, I believe that there are people who are guilty and yet are judged to be innocent, that they get off on a verdict that where there was plenty of evidence against them, such as O.J. Simpson. And I think Bob Menendez Sr. was a very textbook case of that. This is a guy who had a very cozy relationship with a person who did go to prison. Okay, Dr. Salomon Melgen, who was accused of defrauding patients. He was an ophthalmologist. He basically mutilated some of these elderly people, and Bob Menendez Sr. was taking all sorts of gifts from him because he had some investments in Florida, right? So Bob Menendez Sr., who is very cozy with AIPAC, very cozy with other. So this is a problem that I'm having. That for me, I don't care how important the cause of Israel advocacy for you is. I'm not going to support candidates, and I'm not going to support is organizations that support those candidates who support dirtbags. Okay. Um, People like Bob Menendez Sr., they succeed because of the ignorance and the willful, the just like the loose standards of people who aren't willing to actually look and see what's going on. He is a dirtbag. Other people that are in Congress, so people who say, why aren't you talking about the squad? There have been people who are far more anti-Israel than the squad that have been on the Democratic side in Congress for decades. There was Cynthia McKinney. Now, she was voted out by a primary by a guy named Hank Johnson. Turns out that he's also very strictly, he's very anti-Israel. He's called Israeli settlers termites. He gets reelected every year. Nobody says anything about it. People kind of complain and bitch, but they don't do anything about it because he's already in and because he's a minority. You also have Betty McCollum from Minnesota. Now she doesn't get into like these colorful debates and really like animated discussions like some other people do, like for example, Rashida Tlaib does. But Betty McCollum is from Minnesota. She's often said that. I mean, she introduced a bill that was basically saying that Israel denies human rights to Palestinian children. Now, my position is any congressman who has a consistent position who gets elected to Congress, I don't have a problem with having them be there. I have no problem with them expressing themselves freely. But yeah, I'll debate them, and I think that any topic that is, germane to U.S. law and U.S. spending is relevant to Congress. You can have those people in Congress. Does it mean I'm going to support them, vote for them? Absolutely not. Because I think a lot of the foundations of their views are built on lies. There's people like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and Rashida Tlaib who spend all of their public time on the issue of advocacy for the Palestinians. Just like there's some members of Congress that I think spend too much time advocating for um, what was like Ukraine, and there's other people. I don't know who you are, RH. I don't know who you are. So um, anyway, so the big deal that I'm talking about is that you have these problems that are cropping up where you have organizations like DMFI that in order to preserve a tendency within the Democratic Party, so they form super PACs. They raise a ton of money. They try to make it seem like the Democratic Party is about to become basically the Hitler Youth or something, and it's such a cartoonish exaggeration that people know it's a joke. They know it's too ridiculous to even believe. They were putting ads out um, about some of these candidates that were outrageous. They put an ad out, for example, that Nina Turner here in Ohio, who is garbage, but um, she was accused of not being a loyal Democrat. But she had basically said that she had oh, I think I know who RH is, but he says Slava Ukraini. Okay, good. There's opinions from both sides here. There's Slava Ukraini, and there's Larry, who I guess is for Russia. I think I've made it clear in both videos that I don't think that you can take a side in this ridiculous war. I think it's time to end the war. Unfortunately, it's not going to come to a good end. but yeah, there is a real problem where you have groups like these that, in every other way, they're advocating for all these policies. Like Mark Mellman is basically all day. He doesn't tweet about the issue of all these Democratic senators, 24 and Democrat, or actually 22 Democratic senators, plus um, what's his name, plus Bernie and plus Angus King. So 22 Democrats and two independents. They wrote a letter to President Biden telling him that they want him to tell the Israeli government that the U.S. should intercede in the investigation into the death of Shireen Abu Akleh. I don't think it's the U.S.'s. The U.S. needs to be involved in that investigation, because I don't think that they need to be involved in the Middle East nearly as much as they are. I don't believe so. That's my position. And yet, you have organizations like DMFI, which is supposed to defend that position, which is that Israel should be in a close relationship with the U.S. And they're not willing to say a peep, because their whole thing is to preserve the relationship with the Democratic Party and get them elected. And that's exactly what Mark Mellman is tweeting about today. I'll share in the chat his his Twitter account. Good weekend, RH. Thank you for joining. I have an idea of who you are, but I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure we used to have an academic acquaintance. So thanks for joining. Always welcome. Always anything you say, I'm not gonna, you know, tell you not to say it, because I respect you. Um, by the way, the Democratic majority for Israel, they've never said anything to condemn the fact that Keith Ellison, the attorney general from Minnesota, he is a former follower, I should say, of Louis Farrakhan. Never really owned up to it. He's denied any past association with him. When there's actual evidence that he was a huge follower of Farrakhan back in the 80s when he was in law school, and that only later did he break, that he stopped going and hanging around the Nation of Islam. Why? Because it wasn't good for his political career at the time. So the Democratic majority for Israel doesn't say anything about Alan Dershowitz. Used to pretend that he's quitting the Democratic Party because of Alan Dershowitz. He doesn't say anything about it anymore, right? and Alan Dershowitz has a lot more power as Attorney General of Minnesota than he ever had as a congressman from Minnesota. So there you have it. So don't expect an apology from my friend, who I've known for many years, not from my personal life, somebody I know more from YouTube. So I don't think that's URH, but you're welcome to stay anytime. Who said that my article is some sort of anti-Israel propaganda? It's nothing of the case. Okay, it is about how this pack is pulling the wool over the eyes of voters of all stripes, Jewish voters, black voters, Christian voters, and telling them, oh, we're just trying to save the good part of the Democratic Party. You already failed. Okay. You've already failed. Look at what you're defending. You're defending a party of lockdowns, of inflation, of and of racial division. So that's about it. Thank you very much. Please click the link tree below. There's also the let me see. Oh yeah, so my article should be in the chat too, and also in the description. And have a great weekend.